Today's episode is for the grown kids who are debating delaying college by a year or two, or possibly even 10. The ones that just need to feel a little bit more prepared before taking that next step towards higher education. And for the ones that are just a little bit intimidated by the idea of going to college after skipping it for a year or two.
We'll be talking to people that have taken gap years and learn more about why they decide to do that and if it actually helped them, because I think a lot of times we're told that gap years are just for rich kids and to travel the world and just have fun, which I'm all for, but we're wondering, do you actually find a meaningful career through a gap year? Are there other ways to find that?
To guide us along, we'll be talking with a student that took 4 gap years before applying and getting accepted into Brown University, as well as Julie Lithcott-Hames, who served as the Dean of Freshmen and Undergraduate Advising at Stanford University and has extensive experience on the value of gap years. But anyways, let's get into the episode. Hi everyone, welcome to GrownKid. I'm Gael.
And I'm Kayla.
And we're just two 20-year-olds who feel like grown kids and don't really know where our life is going or if we're even prepared for it or let alone how to plan for it.
So that's why we decided to make this show, a podcast where we'll be exploring the career and life issues that we're experiencing as we transition from being teenagers to young adults. And throughout the episodes, we'll basically help you get your shit together by talking with experts and researchers who'll give us actual advice and tips to just help us navigate this really stressful and confusing time.
Anyways, welcome to GrownKid.
GrownKid is made possible by the Schultz Family Foundation, dedicated to helping young people unlock their full potential and successfully navigate to fulfilling careers. GrownKid is made in partnership with Joy Coalition, where purpose-driven content means powerful storytelling. From 13 Reasons Why to Unprisoned, Joy Coalition projects are made to bridge generations and drive groundbreaking conversations.
Alrighty. I feel like a lot of this episode is going to be about me, guys. So, look, a lot
Self-centered. Just kidding. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
Chat, can we clip that?
Oh.
Anyway, so I think first we have to set the scene because, look, Kayla, as if you guys don't know, if you're new here, Kayla, you are in college.
I am in college. I'm currently third year. And
where do you go?
I go to USC.
Wow.
Go Trojans. Why are you laughing? I take that very
I
seriously.
love the school pride. Yes, be proud of that.
Now I've reached the point where I do feel pride in where I go to school. Not that there was ever anything to feel on pride.
Every school has its negatives,
Every school has its negatives, but I feel like now I'm at the point where I feel content with my school and everything that's going on.
Good.
But carry on.
Yeah, so you're in school, and I am not. After high school, I decided not to go to school. And, I think more than anything, I deferred college. I didn't quite take a gap year, which is an interesting distinction. I actually posted a TikTok where I was like, oh, I'm on my 3rd gap year. And people were like, bro, that's not a gap year. You're just fucking unemployed. Like, you just didn't go to school. Like, that's not a gap year. They're not wrong. I don't think they're wrong. I think, should a gap year only be 1 year? That's the question. Anyways. And so let me set the scene, guys, because this episode is, of course, what type of student does a gap year benefit? And we just so happen to have really good perspectives on that because for me, starting back in high school, freshman year, I never had a dream school. Like, the idea of college, I don't think was a big part of my life. It was sort of like, oh yeah, college. I don't think I ever seriously stopped and was like, do I want to go to college? What college do I want to go to? It was just this word that I kept hearing over and over again throughout my life, but I never quite understood it. And so when application time came around, I applied to all in-state schools. I actually was not aware that you were able to apply to like schools in New York and stuff. So I applied to, schools in California, a lot of the UCs. Honestly, I did not have a safety school. Again, I was just so undereducated on what colleges you should apply to that I only applied to like the competitive UC schools, and then I applied to like USC, like Stanford, and those were the only 2 like long shots that I took. And Anyways, like college decision time rolls around. I don't get into USC. I don't get into any of the UCs besides UC Berkeley, which is in the Bay Area. And I live in SoCal. And of course, that school is in NorCal, which is like an 8 hour drive. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I did not expect to get into this school, which, it's a really great school. It's one of the best business schools in the country, has an incredible reputation, especially in like the startup and the business world. But I still decided to take a gap year because, or not a gap year, actually. I remember what happened is I really wanted to go to USC because I didn't want the podcast to end. And if I moved away to the Bay, the podcast would end. And I thought, why am I going to end this thing that has so much momentum when I can just keep going? And really, my mindset around this was, I'm going to go to school to learn marketing, which is such a general degree. If I already have a project that's teaching me so many applicable real life experience marketing skills, why don't I just stick with that? And why don't I just keep growing that business? And I was really going at it with the intention of employers will want to hire me because I have the skills to create successful projects. And so at the time, that was part of my decision of like, okay, college isn't that big of a deal to me. But then when I got rejected from USC, I said, well, I'll just go to community. I'll go to community for 2 years and then I'll transfer. And I was so set on going to USC. I was like, I appealed my decision. I went to community, enrolled, and I was like, I'm going to try to transfer as quick as possible, taking a ton of courses. And I was very, very motivated. But 2 months into doing community college, I got overwhelmed with work because I was getting so much math homework.
Oh,
It
I
was
remember.
10-hour days of math. I don't know if because I'm just bad at math, which I am, or if they were just giving me an insane amount, because even you guys that were at like top schools weren't getting that much work. I don't know what happened, but more of the story, I was so burnt out, I was so tired, and I really just started thinking like, do I even need college? Like, I feel like I'm wasting my time. I remember thinking the world is out there, things are moving, technology is advancing, there's so many opportunities. Why am I spending 10 hours a day doing math? Did not make any sense to me. I didn't have time to invest in like the businesses that I had, in the podcast, and in like all these things I wanted to do. So I dropped out. And I guess after that, I deferred college for a good bit. And it wasn't until the podcast ended last September that I was like, wait, I actually miss school. I want to reapply. I want to be back in that community mindset. I want to be back and get an education. Like, what am I going to do in 30 years? I want a degree. And so I really started giving it like a second thought of, do I want to go back to school? And so after spending like 2.5 years working on the podcast, living life, starting new companies, speaking, like work is good. My career was advancing. I still felt the pressure of, oh my God, maybe this was the wrong decision. Maybe I should go to school and get a degree because all my friends were in their third year and it all happened so quick. And I thought, should I have just stuck with it? Should I have not dropped out and just stuck with community college, transferred? I would have been done in 1 or 2 more years. And so that's when I decided to apply after having an existential crisis of what I was going to do with my life. And I said, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to reapply. I'm going to get a degree just to have it for the safety of it. And so this last admission cycle, I did reapply, got rejected from all but one school. And the one school that I got accepted into, I couldn't afford. And so I made the decision again to not go to school. So I just can't seem to like commit or something.
Do you think later down the line that urge would come back again?
I don't know. It's also just so hard. I think I really felt like the time that I took off school was like, if I don't do it now, like it's now or never. And I'm 20. I'm like, by the time the fall semester starts, I'm going to be 21. I'm going to be coming in as a freshman at 21. 4 years late, basically. It's like, if it's not now, if I wait 1 or 2 more years, do I really want to do this at 22, 23? And I know everybody's on their own timeline and there's no such thing as you're falling behind. But I don't know. I didn't know if like, I think I really, especially when I got rejected, it was like, it's now or never, like it's either I apply now and I do it or I don't go. And the thing is, I also could have gone to community. So that's why I'm like, was I applying because I actually wanted to go back to school or because I was scared? Because if I truly did feel like I need to get my degree and that is something that I want to do in this life, then I would go to community. But I think about spending 2 years in community college and the time, and I'm like, is that really the best place for me to spend these like crucial years of my life? I don't know if the value of that college degree is really worth it for me specifically right now.
And I think you bring up a good point with the timeline. You know, it was after the podcast where the podcast had given us the sense of security and routine for 5 years, that obviously once that ends, you're looking for a new routine now, you know, like a new sense of security and comfort. And I think that's the feeling that you gravitated towards with college, which I understand that. And my journey was not as complicated, I guess, as yours.
Right.
But I also think too that with every admission cycle, there's just new layers of complexity, and like there's new things that you have to do that just makes it harder when you're not doing it right after high school. You know, because when you're doing it right after high school, you have advisors that you can go to, or most of the time, you know, like you have like a counselor that you can reach out to, or a teacher. But when you're doing it by yourself, let's say at like 20 right now, the age that you're at, it's a lot harder to find those resources. And, you know, if you have a question, it's a lot harder to find those answers, which makes just the admission cycle so much more complicated. But, yeah.
Did you ever think about taking a gap year? Or even like being like, okay, you know what? Let me drop out, or let me take a gap year.
I never thought about taking a gap year. I don't know. It was never an option for me. I never thought about, for me, it was either I'm dropping out or I'm continuing, but I'm not taking a gap year. Because the way that I saw it is that once I take a gap year, I'm not going to come back.
Really?
The way that's just how I viewed it, which I know is a very extreme mindset, and it wouldn't have been like that, but I just didn't want to. I just didn't like. There was, for me in my head, there was no reason for me to take a year off just to come back and finish. Like, I might as well just complete it in the 4 years. I did have thoughts about dropping out. Maybe like freshman, sophomore year, I had thoughts about dropping out just because I felt so out of place at school. It wasn't an academic thing of, oh, the classes are like too hard or whatever. It was more of a social thing where, again, I just felt out of place with my peers, the USC community, and I felt that I didn't fit in there well. And so because of that, I felt really alienated, and, you know, I was like, damn, maybe this just isn't the school for me. You know, like maybe I should just like drop out. And I remember having this conversation with, you know, a few of my other friends too, and they would feel the same thing of like, fuck, like I just want to drop out too. Like this is so hard. Like it's so lonely.
The adjustment period.
The adjustment period is so intense, especially when you don't have a safety net to fall back on. You know, it's like, okay, well, I can drop out, but where does that leave me? I'm back home.
What now?
What now? Exactly. And that's not to say that, you know, there isn't a future. Like if I did drop out, you know, I would have still continued to do other things, but it just, I gave myself some time and let that feeling, I gave myself some time and I sat with the feeling, and I just decided that I was just scared. And when I'm scared, my thought is like, let me remove myself from this situation now. But
yes,
I persevered.
Yeah,
and
see?
Here I am, and I feel so much better. I'm so glad I did not drop out.
Oh, yeah.
Even though the voices were loud in my head. The voices, literally. And so I just, it was that feeling of being uncomfortable and the feeling of being lonely and isolated.
See, that's so crazy that it's that same feeling I had, but in the complete opposite context of, I'm not in school. I want to run away from this because I feel so lonely and so isolated by going to school.
That's great.
And I once I took time to sit on it, I realized, no, I'm actually just wanting to run away from my life because I'm in this transitionary period of starting again and starting something new. And that's why I decided I want to apply to college more than anything, was because I was scared. I didn't have direction in my life, and the idea of just applying to something that takes 4 years was comforting. It was like, okay, if I have nothing else, I have college, and I don't really have to think about what's next. So yeah, that was the reason, really. Like, that's what made me want to go back to school. Just fear and wanting to not really take responsibility for my life and go through the hard work of figuring out the next step, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think going back to gap years in particular, I didn't fully know what they were about as well. I mean, I would always hear the term, but I had never, like, besides you, Kyle, but I feel like your gap year path was more untraditional than like the typical gap year
Yeah,
path.
yeah.
And so I never met any other students that really took a gap year. And so I just didn't have an example of what that
And
looked
I
like.
also, I think before this episode, I thought gap years were just, you're kind of just fucking around.
That's what I thought too.
Honestly, you're just taking a break, kind of living life, not really doing much. A lot of people have the connotation that like, oh, only rich kids are taking gap years. And in some ways it is true. I think now I know that the proper way to take a gap year is you're not ready for college, but you're still doing things to prepare for it. So you're in an educational program, you're working on your passion, you're working on finding different programs that fit alongside your major, but you're just not ready to quite fully enter school. And I didn't know that. I thought people that were taking gap years were, again, just living life. But now also I realize that a lot of these programs for gap year students are expensive as fuck. Like they're not
Yes.
affordable. Like people like us that come from a low income, if we do take a gap year, most of the time it's out of necessity because it's like there's no money to pay the entrance fee, to pay for housing supplies, to pay for all the things. So you need some time to save up.
Yeah, I didn't, because I never thought of it as an option. I didn't even look into really what gap years were, but once, we did, it's so expensive. So I guess I'm glad I didn't even have the option to. But that reminds me, I think fully thinking about it, I have had some negative connotations of gap years because I think specifically from our high school, I would see a lot of people do gap years. They'd be like, "Oh, I'm waiting like a year and then I'm gonna go back into school."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, like yeah, that's amazing, like figure out your own thing." But then I would always see them get stuck, I guess you can say. They wouldn't necessarily go back to school and they would, go into the cycle of working and they just wouldn't go back to school. And so thinking about it, that would stick with me. And so that's another reason why I just didn't really give a gap year a thought because I didn't want to be that. And it was just too close to home.
I have a
So I
couple
just
friends that
couldn't.
did that, that took gap years because they were like, oh, no, no. I think a lot of my friends also weren't quite sure what gap year meant. They really thought it was just a break. So they're like, oh, no, I'm taking a gap year just because I want to figure stuff out. But I think now, like, gap years are beneficial when you do it, when you take them strategically. It's not just, I'm just not ready, whatever. You have to be really strategic about it, or else it does harm you more than it helps. Like, even for me, I, you know, didn't quite take a gap year. It really was more deferring school, but my experience going back to school after a couple years and trying to reapply, it came with challenges. One, letters of recommendation. That's one where like teachers have to write to you and they have to tell you like they have to know you. And if you're like on your first, second, third gap year, however long it's been, now that you decide you want to go back to school, it's like getting those references that colleges ask for is so much more difficult. Um, Also the headache of trying to get waivers, like fee
Oh,
waivers
yeah.
for the applications because they add up. And so you got to contact your counselors, getting your transcripts. It's a lot of chasing down materials. And sometimes students aren't lucky enough to have responsive teachers or teachers that they have a bond with. Thankfully, I did have some that still remembered me. But it's difficult, it's not easy to work on all this on your own and balancing like school or balancing work and everything else that you have going on. So it is difficult. And I think there is a lot of shame around taking a gap year because yeah, again, I think a lot of people see you as like a bum or like, oh, you're weak. You're taking a gap year, you couldn't handle it, you can't do this or whatever. And I don't think that's right. Um, I don't want to see people that take gap years as inherently bad or anything. I think it's important to just understand that we're all dealing with different things, different circumstances, and for some people, taking a gap year could be as simple as a mental health break.
I was literally just about to bring that up because
Mm-hmm.
I had like a mutual friend, I guess you can say. They took a gap year because of their mental health, and I was like, wow, you can do that.
You
Like
And take care of yourself.
I
Yeah.
guess that option is there, which is crazy to me because I think looking back during that time when I wanted to drop out, like maybe a gap year would have just helped me reset. But I'm in my junior year now and I feel much better, so it's
Well,
okay.
the thing also about gap years is that many people take them because they don't know what they want to do. And they're like, why am I going to go to school and spend so much money when I don't know what I want to study yet? It's like, I'd rather wait and figure it out. Which is also, I think, one of the great uses of a gap year is it gives you time to figure out what you want to do. And a lot of people choose to go to community college and they choose to take different classes, they choose to do different things and then, you know, go a different route. So really, like what other ways are there to figure out what you want to do in life?
That's an amazing question.
Big question, but is there a way
Yes.
to find a meaningful career without taking a gap year? Like how did you deal with that? You know, why? Because you went straight to school, but you weren't quite sure what you wanted to study. So did you feel like you had room to explore?
I I felt that I had some room to explore, but I think just like setting the major as business, I already felt sort of stifled in that position, and I think it hurts me, but I think that feeling just came with this is all new to me. So I feel like now I can't switch, or like I don't know how to, or I didn't know what other majors were available. Um, but I will say, I feel like I've found the most meaningful courses in extracurriculars that I decided to take. Like classes that weren't necessarily related to business, but I just felt like so much. Like I just felt that I learned so much and I found a connection with the teachers and I genuinely enjoyed learning, which was such a crazy experience.
School can be enjoyable.
No,
Wow,
I
who would
like
have thought?
when I felt those feelings, it just reminded me that wow, I'm in the right place and I really do enjoy being in school. It's just I need to find the right people to guide me through
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
And it's so hard to find that, of course, when it's your first time navigating everything. You don't really know what the fuck you're doing and you're just going to your classes to just like go to your classes. But I think allowing myself the room to explore and like take, some classes that may be more like are more on the fun side or are just something that I'm interested in really helped me, oddly enough, relate that back to business. And like I feel like it just gave me different mindsets and a sort of refresh on how I felt about school as a whole. So I think that's where I found the meaning in not only college but like career overall. It wasn't necessarily my business classes.
right,
It was just
right.
the ones that I was interested in. So I guess it's just like doing things that you're interested in.
Yeah,
Crazy.
no, I,
What?
I, I agree with that. I think it sucks because it's so hard to do that when you're struggling financially.
Oh yeah.
It's like some people think, oh, I can't take a gap year because I'm not financially stable, and school provides financial help in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's true. Fast
And so
forward.
they give you like financial aid, they give you grants, they give you loans, and so that allows you to like actually keep paying for your rent, keep paying for different things. And so a lot of students are like, I'm not ready to go back to school, but actually I need the financial aid, especially like community college students. Community college is
Oh
very generous
yeah.
with their financial aid. And I remember when I applied to community and when I went for those 2 months, they gave me financial aid, which helped pay my bills. And not gonna lie, part of my thinking before I dropped out was like, oh fuck, can I even afford to drop out and like defer college because this financial aid that I'm getting is really helpful, which sucks because there's just so many challenges around this that school is either incredibly expensive that you don't want to waste your time so you need a gap year, or school's giving you financial aid to afford living, but now you don't have the time to stop and think about what you want to do, so you might end up trapped in a career you didn't even want in the first place. God damn.
Jesus.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Didn't you do a semester where you were taking just fun classes?
I did. So actually, as you can see, I just can't seem to make up my mind. It's like I love school, but I just can't commit to it. Like more than anything, I think it's like I'm coping for the lack of community in my life. And so that's why I love the idea of education. And yeah, like a year after I deferred college and dropped out, I was like, wait, I miss school. I want to go back. And so I went and I took a bunch of fun classes. At a community college. I took a dance class. I took a tennis class. I took a business class. And it was just a way to explore my interest. And it was so fun. I think like for a lot of students, if there is a way to, and that's why I wanted to ask the experts is that if there is a way to take community college classes, what are the options for you to explore your interests while taking a gap year? especially what are the options that aren't going to break the bank? You know, what are options that isn't going to cost $20,000 for a gap year semester? Which is crazy that those programs are so expensive and they usually don't offer financial aid. It's crazy that there's so many programs that are so helpful for gap year students, but really only the rich kids can afford it, which is why gap years tend to get a bad reputation. But I don't know. I think a lot of Gen Z people are starting to realize that this is an option for them. It can be helpful if done right. It just requires planning. But on that note, up next is our conversation with Paige, who's a current freshman at Brown who took 4 gap years before starting college because she didn't feel like going into debt without being 100% sure what she even wanted to study while in school, which is so real. It's a really fascinating story, actually, and also a kind of depressing example of how many barriers that gap year students can face when reapplying to school. But, anyways, here's our conversation with Paige.
My gap years were approaching the limit of people were saying, oh, you're going to take a gap decade and then you're never going to go to school. I took 4 of them and then I came to Brown. So, and I don't think I could be at Brown without my gap years.
So, first of all, how did you end up taking this path? Did you plan for it in high school or did it just kind of happen?
So my parents have always been super open to taking a non-traditional route. They were both world travelers. They were both doing their own thing. My dad went and got his master's like really like towards his late 40s or early 50s in his life. And they all just knew that living the life you want to live should be made the way that you want it to happen. And so my only college that I wanted to apply to senior year was the United States Air Force Academy because I felt like it was a place where my life could be made out for me. I would have a job immediately after I finished my college, and I would be able to just not really guess about what I wanted to do. I think the unknown of what do I want to do in life really scared me. And I also just felt like there was more risk involved with attending a traditional university because at the Air Force Academy, it was paid for. And so I was like, is it worth getting into $60,000 worth of debt if I had no idea what I wanted to do? So I had my heart set on applying to the Air Force Academy. And I had to do like a fitness exam, get a letter of recommendation or letter of rec from like our congressman. I forgot the actual name, the term for it, but you had to be nominated by your congressman, and letters of rec from your teachers and things like that. And so I got the denial letter my senior year, and I was medically disqualified for flat feet, which is crazy because I was like, Dr. Schultz is made for a reason. And but it was also, I think, a mix of I didn't like math and science. I never really took that in any of my courses. I've always been more of a visual, like storyteller, or I liked writing, or I liked the humanities. So they knew that. And I was also really present in like having gun reform in high school. So I led one of the largest student-led walkout in our city's history. It was from Washington State. And I think it was a whole buffet of reasons why I didn't get into the Air Force Academy, not just my feet. And so after that denial letter, I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to just focus on something that I'm really interested in. And so I was born in El Paso, Texas, but I grew up in Blaine, Washington. So Paso, Texas is on the U.S.-Mexico border, and I grew up on the U.S.-Canadian border. So I've always lived on borders. And I saw El Paso making the headlines all throughout my college career because this is when Trump was president. And I wanted to understand what was going on down there. This was my hometown, like where I was born. I felt like I wanted to reconnect with it. So my parents, thankfully, were really open to the idea of like, you should just go and we trust you to figure it out. And there was no pressure about me having to go to a different university instead. So my grandma still lived in El Paso. So I flew down there, knocked on her door, said, can I come live with you while I figure this out? And from there, that's where started my journey to the next 4 years of gap years that I had.
Wow, sounds like such a story, first of all. I think the rejection from that school, I mean, everything happens for a reason, as we're seeing now. And also, it's just refreshing to hear that your parents were very supportive about your decision as well. I think a lot of students that take gap years, it's always that awkward conversation of like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to do this now. But when you were first starting out and you just graduated high school and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Like, what's my identity? What am I passionate about? How did you navigate that throughout your gap years, and how did you actively decide, okay, I'm making this decision because this is going to lead me closer to where I want to be?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to like, I'm pretty spontaneous basically. But I always make sure that the risk will not be so great where I wouldn't be able to recover. So to me, college was a risk because it was basically saying I would have to dig myself into $60,000 with a debt on top of having interest rates, and for a degree that I might not have liked a couple years later because I was changing as a person. So that risk was too great. But flying down to El Paso and living with my grandma and seeing how I could figure out how to help with immigration, there was no risk involved. I had a roof over my head. Thankfully, like I wasn't paying any bills besides like gas in my car. So I had a lot of support where I was going. And if I didn't like it, I could go back home and try again on something else. So that was the first thing. I was just evaluating the risk with it. So then after that, I got to El Paso again. I had no clear plan. I only knew my grandma there and maybe my mom's best friend. And so I started asking people in the community, like, who is fighting the good fight when it came to immigration? And I ended up finding a woman whose parents had a sandwich making event every Tuesday where they would feed the families who were waiting on the border for their court date. And so I started going to those. I started talking to people at these events. And then I asked somebody, I was like, where can I find something that's a little bit more stable so I can stay in El Paso longer and see immigration more and understand this concept more? And they said, well, you should go down to this lawyer's district. And there's a lot of nonprofits out there, a lot of independent attorneys. Maybe you'll find something. You ask to volunteer over there. So I went downtown to where the street was, and I saw this mural outside of a building, and it was like this beautiful like story of migration. It had a bunch of monarch butterflies on the front, and the top said Las Americas, and that was a short, but the full name is Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center. So I went inside and I asked if I could volunteer, and they go, well, what can you do? And I was saying, well, I like video and I like storytelling, and I'm basing this all off of like super basic clubs I did in high school that were not special. I didn't fly anywhere around the country. I didn't have anything that was not just like a regular high school club related thing to teach me. And they're like, well, we don't have a communications department. And I was like, okay, well, then let's make one. So I started doing their videos and photos and graphic designs, and I was teaching myself off of YouTube how to do all this. And I started volunteering with the team for 2 months, and I was just doing a lot of things for free and working really, really late nights because I loved it so much. And I think that's when you find something that you really like, you kind of just get lost into it, and you're willing to do it for free just because you're so enthusiastic by it. And one thing led to another, and I got hired on as their full-time communications coordinator. So then I was traveling back and forth between Juarez up to 3 times a week, videographing the lawyers and the clients they were having, and people they were getting out of detention centers, reporting like whistleblowing cases of mistreatment in ICE detention centers. And from there on, I learned that I want to be a storyteller, and I wanted film to be really the medium for it.
Wow, that is very, very powerful. And I'm curious too, throughout your gap years and while you were working and doing all of this amazing work, did you always have that like self-trust within yourself, knowing that, okay, I am on the right path. I know that what I'm doing is what I want to pursue? Or did you ever have those moments of like, damn, like, should I be doing something else? Like, should I be in school right now? Like, did you ever have those moments of doubt? And if you did, how did you go past that?
I did for a little bit. I think I was letting a little outside people kind of still say, oh, you should still be going to college. Like, you should still like get on track with that. And so I was willing to do it if I didn't have to get into a ton of student debt for it. And I ended up applying to the community college in El Paso, and I took 3 classes, and that's actually how I was learning more about graphic design through that. And I took 3 community college classes there, and we can talk about it a little later, but those actually really ended up hurting my application later down the line when I wanted to apply to university. I was ready to fully commit to university later. And so, but overall, I was like, the reason I'm spending so much time doing this is because my application to get into just get a scholarship that could pay for my full tuition, my application needed to stand out from the crowd. And so in high school, I didn't do anything that was, I feel like, overly spectacular. Like I had some good things on my resume, like senior class president and leading these protests and doing these cool like video projects for the school, but so many people do that, and they see so many applicants like that. So the only way to get on par with somebody who usually like comes from a family that can send them on these big internships at 16 to like Washington DC and travel the world and do these study abroads and whatever, then you have to do that after you graduate, and you have to take these gap years, and then your application will stand out and it will sparkle. And so that was the reason, but at the same time, I wasn't just doing it for college. I was doing it for me, and I was doing it for my community and the people's stories I wanted to tell too.
Okay, so how did you eventually make the decision to go back to school, starting with community for a bit and then eventually Brown?
So again, community college was mainly just because I was getting pressured by like my grandma and then a couple mentors back home. My parents, again, never were saying, you have to go, you have to go. It was mainly just other people in my life. And so I had the Pell Grant, and I didn't have to pay for those classes. And it did help me because I realized like I love film and I love learning how to do it. And I was teaching myself based off YouTube tutorials, but the film taught in classrooms was really lackluster and not hands-on at all. A lot of it was just like theory based. I didn't have too many options for like doing actual films. So that kind of opened my eyes. I was like, oh, okay, then your major isn't as cool as you think it is in your head. So I wanted to be really particular in like what I would be majoring in. And that happened when I got on the next year of my fellowship, or on my gap year. And that's when I took a fellowship.
Yeah, most majors sound cool in theory, but they're not really that fun when you realize how like underfunded most of them are. But I'm curious, like, why did you end up feeling that urge to apply to college?
When I was in Germany, I interned for a search and rescue boat called Mission Lifeline. So that was a huge learning experience. And I think while I was out there, because of the university phase in Germany too, we were in class talking about different concepts that I had been working on in immigration. And I really missed that feeling of like opening my mind and thinking about things differently. And I think at this point in my life, I wanted to be a documentary journalist. I would be able to do something like Vice News or Vox News type of storytelling that had the journalism component, but also like beautiful cinematography at the same time. And I knew that if I wanted to be a journalist, then I would need to ask better questions. And to ask better questions, I felt like I needed to be in school and to take these classes so I could think differently about what was going on and also apply like my real world knowledge to the classroom.
First of all, the fact that you just get to know yourself so much better when you are in the real world and having these experiences is such a rewarding time. Even though it may not be the standard track, you get so much more fulfillment out of it, it seems. And so when you were applying to colleges, what was that admissions process like? What challenges did you face?
So I came back from Germany in 2022, and I took that year to really commit to, I wanted to apply to college. I was trying to put a list together of where could I get a scholarship that would be a full ride, or have financial aid that could cover it based off my family's income. And if I didn't get into any of those colleges, then I would take the community college route and then transfer over and do that whole thing. And so I was coming to find out that when I was trying to apply to these colleges, I was kind of getting barred from their system because they were looking at those 3 community college classes that I took in Texas. And they said that if you take one college class after high school, then you were considered a transfer student and you were not able to apply as a freshman applicant. And transfer students get like bottom of the barrel financial aid. They are rarely offered full ride scholarships. I was in a gray area because I also wasn't in school when I was applying to college. So there's not a lot of scholarships offered for people who are like in their gap year. You had to be a matriculated student. So I had no resources for money because transfer students are really snubbed when it came to that. So my next thing I had to do was figure out where in this country they didn't care about my community college credits. They didn't, and it was literally 3 classes, like it was 9 credits in total. And I asked if I could just get rid of them, if I could waive them, and they said, no, like you have to keep them. But I was like, I don't want them, especially if they're preventing me from applying for scholarships or having the same opportunities as like a regular freshman, because I only took these classes to see what I liked. Like I'm coming in as like a more prepared student. But I think it's intentional and I think it's punitive because they don't want to pay for the college, I guess. And that's one loophole they can get out of it, is if they penalize you for taking one community college class after college and never telling you about this, or after high school, and never telling you about this unspoken rule. So I then was searching for colleges that didn't care about my community college credits, would let me apply as a freshman. And it seemed to be really the Ivy Leagues that did. And I never really thought about the Ivy Leagues. I hadn't thought about that could be something I wanted to do. And I'm not big on just going to an Ivy League just to go to an Ivy League. I wanted it to be a right fit. So Brown seemed to be the place, especially with their open curriculum. I could take any of the classes I wanted. There's no prereqs that you have to take that you just have to take that are not part of like your degree track. I love that philosophy to teaching, and I just felt like the school was gonna be the most flexible with the way I wanted to learn. And so when I was doing this application, they said that they didn't care about my community college credits. I guess I didn't meet the threshold. I think you needed a few more than 9. So I was able to apply as a regular freshman, and I applied to 4 colleges in total, and I ended up choosing Brown. And I am on full financial aid because my parents make under a certain income limit.
Wow. First of all, congratulations. Getting into Brown is a huge accomplishment, a big deal. So that's just insane. I'm so proud.
Well, yeah.
And that also just sounds like such a frustrating experience. Like you taking these community college courses and now it's being used against you by these universities and colleges. I can't imagine what that must have been like, just learning how to navigate this new system. And so I'm curious as to how did you deal with that frustration? And did you have a support system during that time? Or did you have any academic advisors that you could go to? Or how were you able to solve those problems?
I didn't burn my bridges in high school. I think that was like the number one thing I took away from this. I was still really tight with my high school counselor. I still knew teachers from high school. And so when I was doing this application process 3 years post-graduation, I hadn't like kept in like touch with them like fully, but like we still we like followed each other on Facebook or whatever. And when these schools were telling me, oh, you have to go back to your high school counselor and get your college transcript. Oh, you have to only have letters of rec from high school teachers, from your high school math teacher. I was like, I'm a non-traditional student. Like I would have way better letters of recommendations from like my recent employers, from people who've seen me in this current stage of my life and who have mentored me, but they didn't want to hear it. They wanted me to go back 3 years to people who hadn't really kept in contact with me and have them write this letter of rec to talk about my character and everything like that. So I was like, okay, we'll make this work. So I reached out to my high school math teacher, my high school finance teacher, and then also my high school counselor. And I sat them down for a PowerPoint of the last 3 years of my life so they could get caught up to speed with what I was doing. And I basically just gave them, like, I had to fill them in on the last 3 years, and we spent like over an hour talking and getting this sorted out. And I guess they wrote me beautiful letters of rec because here we are.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. That's good to know. Don't burn your high school bridges, even as much as you might want to, and just leave that in the past. They're
Yeah.
very important. I definitely get that. And when you got accepted into Brown, you're moving in, you're experiencing the quote unquote college experience. How was the transition back to structured learning like? Not even just structured learning, but a completely different environment. How were you able to accommodate yourself?
Really enjoyed the structure of it. Like I feel like Brown is a vacation, honestly. I think when you I came from a really stressful home life. That year I was home, my mom got sick. She got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I had to come to university where my mom was still in the early stages, and also my dad passed away too. So it was a really rough last couple of years, and not having to be at home and not having to worry about every little thing made Brown feel like a really safe space for me, where I didn't have to always stress out about what was going on. It's a whole nother topic on its own about being like a young caregiver, and then also trying to navigate care for your mom when you're on the other side of the country. But it gave me such a solid grounding about why am I here and what am I using my time for at school, where I understood more like, yes, grades are important, but I'm not going to really stress out about it. Like, I'm going to learn and enjoy the readings and take the classes I want to take. I'm going to do my best. But if life happens, life happens. And if I have to get on a plane and I have to go home, then I have to go home. And I think I'm just a lot more grounded in the fact that I'm trying to utilize my time here to also help my mom and also talk more about our healthcare system and Alzheimer's, and using all that storytelling things that I've gained these last couple years on my gap years to now make Brown the place where I can have a platform to talk about this, because they have so many amazing resources. It's a research institution. It's a place for you to talk about issues in our world and social dilemmas we want changed. And Brown has been a place where I'm ready to really like call attention to things that I'm finding difficult in my life and I want to change so it can help other people's lives.
Her story is so fascinating, one, because I think it's so beautiful about pursuing your interest, like it really, like living a good life and making the most out of life in college and the college experience or whatever, or a gap year. It's just having the courage to explore your curiosities, like see the world, pursue it. The fact that she just talked to a woman, did this, and this led to her finding more and more of what she really felt passionate about. Like, I'm such a big believer in that. It's such a, there's articles on this about like the play style of learning, like the kindergarten style of learning, which is just like play with different things, explore different things. Like that is truly how you find what you enjoy. And I just don't think people do enough of that, which I can't blame them because so many of us just don't have time, right? Like in school, you're taking all these AP classes, you're studying so much just to get into a school, and it leaves you no time to explore any curiosity. So yeah, by the time you get to school, you're just kind of like, wait, what the fuck? And so that's why I think a lot of college students end up finding their passions late into college when they finally start having the time to like tinker here and there. So it makes sense that gap years are so powerful because it gives you that time back.
It's so weird. I feel like college and education is so backwards sometimes. like, like why? Who built it this way? And what also stood out to me too is when she first got rejected from military school, that was such a blessing in disguise for her. Like, what's it called? Rejection is redirection, you guys. I am a firm believer, and I mean, if she got into that, she wouldn't be where she is now, and she loves where she is. And so it really is just knowing that, okay, maybe some opportunities are just not meant to work out, as shitty as it may feel in the moment.
Last thing is that like this could be a whole episode on its own, but when she said like she really just had to accept that if she had to go back home and take care of her family, she just had to do it and there was no other option. That, oh my God, that is such a big reality for so many young people. And I think eventually I want to do an episode on like young caretakers and the privilege that some people have to like not need to focus on taking care of their family, which seems like it's such a basic thing, but like it's rarer than you might expect when it comes to like first gen students. But this isn't the episode for that. But keep an eye out for that one, actually. Anyways, so up next we have Julie Lithcott-Hames, and she is an author, speaker, and advocate focused on helping humans find their true north. She's written 3 nonfiction books, including How to Raise an Adult, Real American, which is a memoir, and Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. She served as the Dean of Freshman and Undergraduate Advising at Stanford University and is now a member of the Palo Alto City Council. But most importantly, she believes in humans and is rooting for all of us to make it, which is so sweet. And we wanted to speak to her because she's such an incredible person when it comes to helping young people find their purpose, which ultimately seems to be what a gap year is about, right? So anyways, here's our conversation with Julie.
Well, first of all, I love that we're going to talk about gap years. I really like gap years. The Dean of Freshman role was about inculcating a sense of belonging in our newest undergraduates so that they could persist through challenges, build a sense of community, and ultimately thrive. You know, it was about attending to the rituals and rites of passage that really help somebody feel like they're a part of something. It was about making sure they knew they mattered to us, that they weren't just, numbers. They were humans. Look, gap years, I think there's too much of childhood right now that is, you have to do this in order to get that. You have to do this in order to get that. And then you get that. And like childhood is a ladder, it seems, that leads to like a door, which is a college. And that's so narrow. Yes, there's college, and college is good for a lot of reasons, but college is a long time and it's expensive. And you want to be sure, if you are going to college, that you're really equipped to make good use of this expensive but terrific resource. So if you've been on this like trajectory, like everything leads to the next thing and then college, you may not have had a chance to look around much and really ask, is college right for me? Should I go to a 4-year? Should I maybe go to a 2-year community college, junior college? Should I go straight to the workforce? Should I go into the military? There are loads of things you can do after high school, and they all offer a lot of merits. Gap year is a way to say, you know what? I'm not going to treat life like a ladder where every next rung, like every year, I know automatically what I'm supposed to be doing. Like K through 12, that's that ladder. College doesn't have to be the 13th rung. College will always be there, will be available. So it's sort of like, get off the ladder, climb down from the ladder for a second, and look what else there is besides this ladder. And then if you do decide, yeah, I am going to college, then because you've taken this year away, hopefully doing something useful, studying something, traveling to a new community where you can learn, about someone else's culture or learn a language, work a job in a place that's unfamiliar. Don't just sit at home on the couch. Like, that's not a useful gap year. A useful gap year gives you the chance to explore and put yourself somewhere different, ideally, because that's when we really have the chance to grow and learn who we are and who we aren't. And, so you come away from that experience, you're more grown up, you're more familiar with yourself, you're more self-reliant, you've learned how to solve a whole lot of problems, you're going to be clearer on what your interests are. All of that will lead to the greater likelihood that you will not just make it through college, but like really do well in ways that'll serve you in the future. There's research that shows this. And I should have said, I was on the board of a gap year organization called Global Citizen Year, which has rebranded itself and is different org now. But it was, I served on that board because I firmly believe that gap year has advantages for students in terms of their personal development and readiness for college.
I love that. And I think it's so fascinating what you said about, like, yes, I mean, a gap year is a time for you to finally stop and look up and see, why am I on this path that I've been on my entire life? Why have I never questioned that path before, And personally for me, I applied to college, got into one school. It was very far away, and it was UC Berkeley, which was a great school for entrepreneurship. But it would mean like going to school for entrepreneurship, but at the cost of stopping the momentum that I had in my entrepreneurial journey that I was at the time. And in my head, I decided, like, well, it doesn't really make sense to go to college and lose the momentum. Like, momentum is hard to build. And so if I have it, let me just run with it. So I kept at it because I thought at the end of the day, college will always be there, right? And it's not necessarily a time sensitive resource. But now it's been 3 years. I feel like my career is still going up. I've learned so much. Things have only really gotten better for me since then. I don't feel like I've stalled. But I think that I still do feel that pressure sometimes of, do I go back to school? And, at the time, I didn't really know that I was making a decision to not go to college. I was really just pursuing what was right. But I feel like there's so many students that probably are stopping after senior year of high school and saying, like, okay, what am I actually doing? Do I take a gap year? Do I not? So I'm curious, like, how can you make a decision when there's just so much unknown? How do you decide? Am I gonna really feel better and more passionate about what I want to pursue after a gap year? Am I not? Is this a waste of time? Should I just like go straight into it? So how far ahead can you plan? And what are the decision frameworks that you think students should consider when taking a gap year?
Well, the first thing that I want to say is, like, I think I've already mentioned, there's no right path. So I want to, like, it's not as if, oh, that would have been the right path. We have no idea what the path we didn't take would have been like. And often if we're unhappy in this path, we say, oh, I should have done that. That would have been better. We have no idea if that would have been better. They might have been, equally good, but for very different reasons. There are myriad things we could do in life. And I think we can get caught up in, I have to optimize it all, figure it all out, as if there is somehow the right path and the second right path and the third right path. And that's just the wrong way to think about all of the options available to us in life. So what I would prefer is, instead of, is this with the sort of one is right, one is wrong, I would say, let me ask myself, do I feel excited to go to college this fall? Do I feel ready to be in a greater degree of rigor, meeting brand new people, living away from home, maybe, usually, am I eager for that, right? Eagerness, right? Not just, yeah, I'm going to go to college, and, don't do it if you're like, well, it's college, I have to. Like, no, I want you to be pulled for, excuse me, pulled forward with eagerness, with excitement, with curiosity, whichever path is making you go, ooh, that sounds awesome. Like, yeah, maybe it's a little scary, but also it could be kind of neat. Like, listen to your body. What kind of energy is coming up in you when you consider the options? These are clues about which one might be the more rewarding choice for you at this time of your life.
I think a part of listening to your body is also trying to find your life purpose and how that looks like for you in your career and really just in practicality. And I think gap years really do help with that. I've also noticed a few students that have taken gap years. It can sometimes be easy to get sidetracked or fall into this idea of, maybe I don't want to go back to college. Maybe it's actually not the right decision for me. And so I'm curious, how can a student structure their gap year so that they can fully maximize its benefits?
Well, Kayla, I want to push back on that, because you said some people find themselves sidetracked. And again, that implies you're supposed to be on a track. You're not, your sidetrack means, you're not here, you're over here. I don't buy into that. I think for Gael, for example, doing this entrepreneurship stuff, not everyone's going to end up going to college. And if you started some entrepreneurial thing after high school and it's working for you and you're getting some wins and also a lot of lessons learned, so you're growing and you're getting better and faster and more efficient and agile and visionary, like, I don't know what your metrics are in your entrepreneurial world, but all of this is learning. It's not traditional college learning. It's not book learning. It's not sitting and listening to someone else. It's learning by doing, right? Having all of these experiences that are training you how to think, training you how to problem solve, training you to be resilient when things don't go your way. Like, this is life teaching you things that are so important. And it may turn out that your entrepreneurial life is, you may look back and you're like, I'm 30. I never went to college. Well, fine. Looks like you're doing great. Like you don't have to go, right? College is meant to give you tools to prepare you to be successful in life in some way. You're already successful. Like maybe you don't need it. Or maybe you do decide to go back because there's something specific you want to learn and it can only be learned at a university. Okay. So I don't believe in the concern about sidetracked. Um, I'm never going back. I think parents are concerned about that. Oh, I could never let them do a gap year. They might get sidetracked. They might never go. Well, that's a different thing. Okay. A parent's concerned that I need you to go to college because I've decided that college is what'll make me proud or what I think will lead you toward the right career. As a young person, I think you need to be able to be in conversation with your parents and say, hey, parents, okay, here's why I'm excited about this gap year. Here's what I intend to learn. I will check in with you. This is a part of my education, if you will. It's just more of an experiential part of my education. I do plan to go to college, unless somehow my whole life turns upside down because my gap year turns out to lead me in a new direction. Yeah, I'm planning to go to college. So I think having that conversation, frankly, with parents can help.
And what have you found with parents? Like, is there a way to help them trust their kid that, like, yes, this gap year is a good idea, actually? Is it by joining a program, but also keeping in mind that, I mean, like, programs can be so inaccessible, and where you're dealing with being a first generation college student, how do you explain to your immigrant mother that, like, no, 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 I am going to college, just not now? I'm actually going to go travel the world on a ship with other students who are also doing that. It's like, what? Why? No, I'm not letting you do that. Like, you're going to school. So what is it about gap year programs that can make it inaccessible? Who are the types of students taking it? Because the connotation right now is like, are gap years really just a bunch of rich kids to travel the world?
Well, there certainly always has been that piece that rich families send their sons and daughters, their children off to travel somewhere, to prepare them for this and that. And that's a very old concept, and presumably that still happens in rich families. But let's ignore them for a second. What I would say to my immigrant mother is, first of all, this is how I would always structure this conversation. Open with gratitude, love, praise, whatever you can offer. Grateful you've sacrificed so much. You've provided for me. I love you. I know you love me. I know you want the best. Pause. I have some thoughts about what I want to do this year, and I know it might not be what you have in mind for me, but I'd like the opportunity to tell you. Is that okay? Like, approaching the conversation in an emotionally mature way helps demonstrate to your parent that you have the maturity to make this decision. Here's what I've looked into. Here's what is offered. Here's what it costs. Here's how I'm going to handle it, and here's why it's good. And then I would say the experts say that these years, whether I go on a ship or I go travel to another country in this way, or I go, do a gap year over here, that this actually prepares me to be more successful in college because it's teaching me real world skills that are going to help me succeed, in the college level. So I would say that it's absolutely true. And, but I would you hear me start with compassion and gratitude, because that's what the parent needs, that reassurance that they're not ignoring everything that I've always expected or we've always talked about. This is actually all aligned.
That is so interesting because I made a TikTok a couple months ago where I said I took like 3 gap years, and these are some things you should consider before reapplying again, because I was in the process of reapplying to school and realizing I need to go hunt down teachers, I need to get a fee waiver, I need to go pay for my transcript and figure out how to explain that I took like 3 years off, but I'm more prepared than ever. The video got over like 1.5 million views, and so many people in the comments were just roasting me, saying like, you're taking more than 1 gap year, like that's not a gap year anymore, you just didn't go to school, like why are you doing this, you just deferred college, like this is dumb, you're just unemployed. So yeah, like honestly, what is the difference between taking a gap year and deferring college? Is there even one?
Well, I think a gap year sounds like, I think there's a path I should be on. I'm going to go do this on the side for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back. But what you've just described is I did that, and then I discovered this is a path I really like, and maybe this becomes the path. Both are valid. Okay. What I am pushing, and congratulations on your video. That's very exciting. And I love that you're bringing this option, to more people's consciousness. I'm pushing back against the only right track is college. And if I'm not on that path, something's wrong with me. Okay. If you're feeling called to go to college, go to college. If you're excited about that school that's admitted you and you're going to study this over here and you like, feel good when you're there, you like the vibe, you like the kids, like go. But if there's a part of you that's longing, yearning, curious about something that's like over here, like be willing to look at that and say, hey, this, they didn't talk about this in high school, but dang, this sounds awesome. Like you have to listen to that impulse in your body. Okay. The other thing I want to say is the admissions people love essays written about gap years, whether it's a traditional gap year, like I'm going to get on a boat with strangers for 9 months, or it's non-traditional. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. If you can write about what you learned, what you discovered about your own fears, your own strengths, your own weaknesses. Like gap years make for great college essays. Okay. It's like the utilitarian, like gap years lead to better admissions outcomes. Okay. So you can tell your immigrant parent that, like, I am more likely to get into a college because I did a gap year.
So the thing about a gap year is it can be so difficult to know you're actually making progress because you're not getting grades, you're not doing this. It's also personal. So I'm curious, like, how would you define and how would you help young people know that they actually are improving or learning in some way throughout the gap year?
So here's what I'm going to tell you. Global Citizen Year, where I was on the board, this is what they said. So I'm borrowing from them. This is not original Julie. This is from Abby Fallick, who founded Global Citizen Year. She said, we have our comfort zone, which is like our home. If our home is a safe space, our couch with Netflix and Hulu, like our comfort zone. I'm good. I'm like here. I'm safe. We have our panic zone, which is like, oh, shoot, I'm scared. I'm in trouble. I'm going to die. Like, this is terrible. And in between our panic zone and our comfort zone is our stretch zone. Okay. You learn in the stretch zone. You do not learn in the comfort zone. Okay. It's by definition not a place of learning. It's a place of comfort. It's like a couch. Okay. You learn in the stretch zone. You don't want to be so stretched that you're panicking. All right. You go into this circumstance knowing I'm not going to be at home. That's going to teach me some things. I'm going to have to rely on my ability to talk to strangers. That's important in life. I'm going to have to learn a new town or a new city. Maybe I'm going to live with a family in a different culture. That's going to be like, maybe I'm going to work in a new community. Like maybe, it's sort of by definition, learning and growing takes this stretch out beyond what you already know. And yet it's terrifying and exhilarating. It's like both. It's like I'm scared. I'm not terrified, literally. It's like, wow, this is new. Am I going to be okay? And then you do it. And you're like, look, I'm okay. You almost discover the fact of your own existence with greater clarity when you're somewhere else.
I have a year left and I'm thinking like, damn, maybe I should have taken a gap year, but I just wasn't aware that that was an option for me. And so it really is just so inspiring hearing how it can really help you find your purpose. And I'm surprised too that this conversation is turning out to be not so much an analytical thing, but much more of an emotional and mental aspect. You're looking for your purpose and what excites you. And I think before this conversation, I was definitely thinking about gap years more like, okay, what programs can you do? What are the numbers? What's the data? And so it's really nice and comforting knowing that it's more so a process of just finding who you are.
And I just think gap years are an incredibly exciting opportunity to learn in a non-traditional setting a whole lot about yourself in your, by stretching because you are somewhere other than what's familiar. So it really helps grow a person up more. And if they do end up going back to college, which most do, it helps them be more intentional about what they choose to do in college, and it helps them be more successful. So I just see it as a win-win.
Wow, I really loved that conversation. I feel like I wished my 18-year-old self had that conversation with Julie beforehand, because I think I definitely would have reconsidered going right to college right after high school, or maybe just even taking a gap year during my college years. But overall, I feel like what really stuck with me is just knowing that gap years is much more of an emotional journey rather than trying to get an internship, which it can be. But I think it's more so just knowing that you're trying to find who you are and you're just taking a little break and then going back into college.
You don't think the pressure of like not being in the same class as all your friends would have got to you though? Like you think you actually would have seriously considered taking a gap year?
I think that pressure definitely would have gotten to me a little bit, but there was a time, I think it was like maybe freshman year or sophomore year of actual college, where I was like, I'm dropping out. And, you know, maybe I didn't need to be so extreme. Maybe I just needed to take 6 months off, a year off. But I did not. But definitely I would have gotten a little bit of FOMO, not gonna lie.
Oh, and it's fine. I think that it was interesting knowing how emotional it is and just that there is no right or wrong. I know like sometimes we ourselves like talk a lot about like, oh, people are getting sidetracked, or you know, this person still isn't in school, or they dropped out of community, or why are they doing this? This was enlightening in the way that I think it really opened my perspective on no one's on any timeline, and it's not up to me to like impose that timeline on other people, whether I say it to their face or I just judge in my head. Because I think it's very easy to start judging people, right? Because the stigma, and it's ironic that I do it even as someone that didn't go to school. I see other people not go to school and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you should be going to school. Why are you slacking off? It's like, you know, ultimately I feel like that's just me projecting or something, because everyone is on their own path. And maybe a person took 3 years, 4 years, or they just never went to school, and like, it doesn't matter. You make your own path. But then again, it's also like, okay, but what's the line of? And you also like, yes, you're on your own path, but this path, like, you have not taken any steps. So you actually got to start walking and doing stuff, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the judgment aspect. However, I do feel that the judgment is a bit different from where we stand because of the way and background that we grew up. Like, we didn't have a lot of examples of people actually taking gap years and then going back to school, you know? And not to say that they have to, but I think, at least for me, because school was just always ingrained in my head, I had that expectation for myself, and I think I just like subconsciously put that onto other people. But to each their own.
Besides that, last thing I want to say on Julie is this idea of being in a stretch zone. And honestly, I'm a very big believer in that. I'm such a like, if it's not going to kill you, if it's not going to harm you, there's no, like, what do you have to lose? It could be awkward as fuck. You might be sweating. You might be anxious, scared. But those are just feelings. Like, they're not going to actually hurt you. So I'm a big believer in doing things that are like really forcing myself to do things that are a little uncomfortable, that I might not even want to do, just to see, like, know that I can do it. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and I've developed a lot of self-trust in myself because of that. And I think that's the one piece of advice that was really reassuring to hear from her as well.
Definitely. And I think as somebody that loves their comfort, I love being comfortable, I love my stability. That's something that I am always trying to be aware and conscious of, and putting myself in situations where, shit, I might put myself in a situation where I'm like, I know that this is going to end badly, but I sort of just want to experience it. Like, sue me, I don't care. So a lot of it is just also just having enough trust in yourself, knowing that, okay, maybe things might go shitty, but it's fine because I'm gonna be okay and things will get better.
Lots of different interesting perspectives in this episode. We have our own unique one, but I think just talking to the people that started college later in life makes me feel better about my own journey. I don't think it's ever too late to start college.
No.
Never.
I've seen some older people in my classes, and it's
so
never
impressive.
like a weird thing. It's like, oh, okay.
It's so impressive that you can just really start it at any age when you're ready. Like, it's comforting in that way, that I do feel this pressure sometimes that I have to do it now. It's now or never, now or never. But I'm like, no, I think the option is always there. If I really want to do it, I can. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. and all of the amazing grown kids that are trying to figure out if a gap year is right for them, how to go back to school, how to deal with academia. It's a hard world. It's a hard world.
We're figuring it out.
We're trying our best.
We are trying our best.
But thank you for listening to this episode. Please answer the Q&A or the poll and give us your thoughts on gap years, deferring college, or even dropping out. So
Scary.
Curious to see everyone's decision and how they came to that conclusion, whether you decided to drop out and pursue your passion or maybe explore while you're in school. All
Or maybe you
respectable
did
stuff.
something completely different and random and
made
you started
your
your
own
own podcast company.
Exactly. Make
Like,
your own
who
path.
knows?
Make your own path. It's scary, but it's so worth it, guys. If you're new here, throughout the next couple of episodes, we're just going to be chatting about everything that has to do with transitioning from being a teenager to a young adult.
But anyways, thank you guys for listening. New episodes will be coming out every Thursday. So make sure to follow us so you get notified and you
Yes.
can sit with us for an hour and just listen to us ramble.
You already know. You can listen to the podcast everywhere you get your show from. Maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's Spotify, maybe it's Apple. It's up to you. See, build your own adventure, choose your own path. That's the theme of today. Follow us on socials at GrownKid, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever else there is. We're on
Everything.
there probably. Yeah.
Facebook.
But yeah, guys, thank you for listening. Good luck forging your own path. Go explore the world, find your passion, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.